Shalom. This is Mary Omni, the woman of Revelations 12. And this is the Republic Notice. The Republic Notice to George Zimmerman, his attorney, prosecuting attorney, the judge, the assistant attorney general, and anyone involved in his case, in his defense, or his prosecution. George Zimmerman is an incorporate doctrine contractor. That means he has no constitutionality in this country. Nobody forced his parents to come here by chains, whips, or anything. They came voluntarily. So they're called consenters. Travon Martin was born a non-consenter. He was first constitutionalized as 3/5 in 1787. His people. They became constitutionalized legally as legal non-consenters in 1868. The Dred Scott case of the Supreme Court upholds this. The determination was that Dred Scott in 1857 did not have any legal rights. That meant Dred Scott didn't have any legal rights to consent to the 13th, 14th, 15th, or the 1866 national inheritance of citizenship and personhood that gave him jurisdiction and enforcement rights across all jurisdiction that's in America and beyond. That means all that the 1866 Civil Rights Act, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment are non-consented amendments and constitutionality and of Reconstruction. The Reconstruction Amendments gave blacks the whole Constitution inheritance. That means they became coextensive with the Constitution. You can find this when Howard Jacob, one of the architects of the 14th, went and talked to Harvard to explain the 14th, that blacks are coextensive with the 14th. That means from front to back. In other words, blacks are the walking Constitution. So Travon Martin was walking his land. And George Zimmerman is outside any constitutional protections in truth, because he has not one contract, no matter how far he look over this earth, that can supreme Sabrina, Tracy Martin, and Travon Martin Constitutional Supremacy Clause and Tracy Martin 15th New Jerusalem Wall. George Zimmerman consented as a consenter that death and execution is okay without trial, jury, judges, or evidence. He consented that when he pulled the trigger and killed and murdered Travon Martin in cold blood. He consented that a trial wasn't necessary, a jury wasn't necessary, evidence wasn't necessary, a judge wasn't necessary, witnesses wasn't necessary. That wasn't nothing necessary. What he said that was the only thing necessary was that he was a black man, but he's black. So in George Zimmerman world, everything is okay to murder, even without trial, jury, judge, witnesses, or evidence. So he said in his own way, George Zimmerman, in his own heart and soul, he consented that execution was an accepted way of law, even without judge, jury, evidence, or weighing of anything. Therefore, George Zimmerman, as a consenter on constitutional land, consented to his own execution without trial, without jury, without judges, without evidence. He consented to his own execution because he is a consenter in this land. And he consented that it was totally acceptable if on someone's land or ground to execute without jury, judge, trial, or evidence. Meanwhile, Travon Martin was walking his land. See, Babylon wants to build the ground on God's land that he contracted to blacks in the Constitution. So while everybody is here warring against black, they warring against the Constitution. They are consenting that they have no land rights. This is why they need a Stand Your Ground Act and a gun lobby, because they know they have no true land supreme constitutional rights. So they lob and mob in grounds and stand your ground laws of land. Meanwhile, Tracy Martin, who is the 15th New Jerusalem Wall, because the 15th New Jerusalem Wall blocks all who came to America. That's the most powerful inherited vote on the planet. It's a non-consented vote. And it puts President Obama in the White House until the black man and woman says he has to leave. Unless all you who came here voluntarily can prove that the Constitution that was here before all y'all came here, that supreme blacks and gave them inherited non-consented 14th, unless you can prove that you got a document higher than the Constitution, then you have no contractual right or authority to vote President Obama out. Your contracts are dung. They outside of constitutionality. I don't care how much media can supreme the Constitution. Poll numbers can supreme the Constitution. Quintillion tramplers running the dung vote with phony machines can supreme the Constitution. If 3/5 was a vote, then the black man has 60% vote by the 15th Amendment alone. So that's 60 compared to your Babylon 40 of the George Zimmerman types. All you welfare recipients who want to try to propagandize blacks as being welfare recipients when all y'all claim to grab on to a slave remedy and greediness and poverty from all over the world. Then you got a nerve to point fingers at who you're sucking the breasts of, the breast milk of. Yeah, you hate black women because she's the closest to God. She's the closest to God walking in America. And she is the supremacy clause. And Travon Martin, mother, is the supremacy clause, and Travon Martin don't have to give up no evidence of anything to defend him, because first of all, he is deceased, so keep your name out of his mouth. And any of his records that Babylon try to perpetrate in their corporate doctrine contracts, all they do is try to use in corporate doctrine contracts to dirty up constitutional heirs. But guess what? The Most High made them the non-consenters, the untouchables contractor. They didn't consent to go in the Constitution, so they are Teflon from all other contracts, including voting contracts. Meaning if blacks vote for Obama, then all the rest of y'all votes, it bounce right off of them because they mean nothing. Once blacks votes, that make President Obama Teflon. Michelle is the 14th Amendment anyway. So when blacks vote so-called black, like you said, they voting constitutionally. When you voted white, Hispanic, or Asian, or whatever else you voted for in corporate and foreign doctrines, and you voted your children into 42 generations as debt whores and holders. Now, George Zimmerman is entitled to an execution by his own consent. That's the bottom line. And he said he need nothing else. George Zimmerman is due an execution by his own consent. And he needs nothing else but his consent, and that's what he gave. This is the house of King David, Mary Omni, the woman of Revelations 12. And believe me, I've been through enough. I've been to hell and back again. And guess what? I gave birth to Emmanuel, and he's going to run nations with an iron fist, and he's not taking no nonsense of any in corporate doctrine, BS dung contractors. All of you are dung contractors, and you know it. The time of revelation is here. You don't have nothing to top the Constitution. It's a holy covenant, and it's a blood contract. You can't get around it because it's cosmically Fort Knox. Travon Martin writes it's cosmically Fort Knox. That's his land, and they own all that land around there and have the supreme contract on it.